welcome back to episode number 2 of the Winning Agenda's coverage of Tales of Aria spoiler season. My name is Jesse Marshall, and I'm very excited to be here with the second Guardian hero and the second hero from Tales of Aria overall that we've seen. This is, of course, Oldheim, or Oldhim, Grandfather of Eternity. So we already saw Lexi, which was our lightning and ice hero. Oldhim, or Oldheim, I'm going to go with Oldheim, is our earth and ice hero. So we know that we've got 3 elements in Aria, and we've got 3 heroes. And each of the 3 heroes crosses over 2 different elements. So Oldheim has essence of earth and ice, meaning that we can have earth, ice, and guardian cards in our deck, as well as elemental cards. So once per turn defense reaction, Oldheim you can pay 3 resources. If an earth card is pitched this way, prevent the next 2 damage that would be dealt to Oldheim this turn. If an ice card is pitched this way, the attacking hero puts a card from their hand on top of their deck. So I guess it's worth thinking about this, taking a step back and thinking about this is our first hero that has a defense reaction ability as their hero ability, from what I can think. Maybe there's another one, but I can't think of any others. It's cost 3, which, you know, in a Guardian deck, you're playing a lot of blues. So pitch a blue, you play this defense reaction, but what do you actually get out of it? It's quite demanding in terms of it needs to be a card of a particular type. So either earth or ice to get any effect out of this. Obviously, if it's an earth and an ice card, then you get both effects. But as far as we can see from the spoilers so far, there's only going to be 1 card that crosses over both earth and ice. That being said, what exactly do the 2 halves of this ability do for us? So the earth effect, if we pitch a blue earth card, we get to prevent 2 damage that would be dealt to Oldheim this turn. That's not particularly strong. It's okay, I guess. A blue defense reaction that blocks for 2, that's kind of on rate for a blue defense reaction card. So cards like Sink Below and Fate Foreseen, the red versions, cost you 0 to block for 4. This effectively costs you that card that you're pitching to block for 2. So the same as the blue version of Sink Below and Fate Foreseen. The difference is that you're pitching rather than playing the card. So if you're playing a fatigue game plan and you're just trying to turtle your opponent out, then you're not actually going down cards from your deck, and you're not going to run out of cards necessarily by doing this. So if you're down to the last earth card in your deck, you can just keep pitching that same earth card over and over again and blocking for 2 every turn as a defense reaction. The downside though, the upside to that, alongside the fact that it's just like, it's on rate for a blue defense reaction, is that this blue card that you put in your deck, as long as it's an earth card, also has its other mode. So you're not actually playing like a blue Sink Below or a blue Fate Foreseen in your deck. You're playing a blue whatever else, as long as it's an earth card. So it can be an attack action, it can be a non-attack action, and you still get that card's normal effect when you want that mode. But this essentially gives all of your earth cards that are blue pitch another modality where they can defend for 2 in the defense reaction step. The interesting, I guess, downside to this, though, is that they can't be used from Arsenal. So you don't really get the defense reaction bonus, meaning that if someone's dominating you, you can't play this blue card from Arsenal because it can only be one that you're pitching. Where this comes into its own, though, is I guess you don't need to commit to blocks. So obviously defense reactions do have that advantage over blocking in that you can wait to see if they play an attack reaction. You can wait to see what they're doing, and you don't have to commit to the block before they react with their attack reactions. So this does turn your blue pitch card into a modal card. I mean, all Flesh and Blood cards have 2 modes. They can be used as the thing that you want to play them as, or to block for their block value. And most attack actions and non-attack actions are going to have that mode of being able to block for 2 or 3 anyway. You do get this marginal benefit of this being a defense reaction, so the timing is a little bit better, but that's not exceedingly powerful. The second mode is if it's an ice card that's pitched, the attacking hero puts a card from their hand on top of their deck. Now, this is effectively forcing your opponent to trade one of your cards in hand for one of their cards in hand. So you can trade your blue for any card that they've got left in hand. And I feel that this is probably the more powerful half of this. this ability, being able to, as we'll see further on in this video, there are a lot of ice cards that are attacking your opponent's hand and your opponent's ability to do what they want to do. So being able to take out either their next attack action from their hand if they're trying to go wide, or their next pitch card, or even their arsenal card by just pitching one of your cards, can be a really profitable trade for you and gives you a lot of flexibility. Again, you have control over when you use your ice cards for this mode, and I just foresee lots of situations where it's going to be profitable and favorable for the Oldheim deck to be pitching an ice card to deprive the opponent of that arsenal card or their next attack on their turn. It is worth noting that the defense reaction can prevent some of the lightning effects. A lot of the lightning effects are on hit, so you might not be able to prevent the lightning effect itself by using Oldheim's defense reaction. But if they're coming over the top for one, this doesn't just prevent the next 2 damage from one source, it actually prevents the next 2 damage full stop that would be dealt to Oldheim. So if you block, say, for 3 on a 4-power lightning attack that also has, if this hits, deal 1 additional damage to the opposing hero, if for some reason you have a blue that doesn't block, if it's an instant or has no block value or the attack's dominated, you can actually use Oldheim's defense reaction to prevent the last damage, the 4th damage that's coming over the top of your block 3, as well as the lightning damage on the trigger. So it's pretty good. This, I should have mentioned as well, when I was talking about defense reactions before, turning your card in your hand into a defense reaction doesn't necessarily let you get around the dominate effect, while Oldheim's defense reaction actually does, because you're not defending with a defense reaction from hand. So in a way, it has that additional utility against dominate, compared to just having the card in your hand that you want to block with. So you can block with one card, you can pitch another blue to Oldheim to use that defense reaction to block an additional 2. So Oldheim does have that additional utility, particularly against, I'm thinking like Herald of Erudition, those 5-power kind of mid-strength dominated attacks, which are likely to go over the top of one blocking card, and they have a really powerful on-hit effect. Having something like Oldheim's ability to block for 3 and prevent the next 2 means that 5 power is no longer enough, even on a dominated attack, to either demand an equipment block or be pretty much assured of getting through. So there is a little bit of utility there, especially if we start to see the Ice Ranger cards doing a bit more dominating off Shiver and some of the other cards we saw from Lexi. And you've got the ability to potentially stop some of those lightning effects as well. Because as I said, this can actually stop 2 little instances of lightning zaps potentially. So what are the cards that go with Oldheim? We've seen the hero ability, and I mean, as we know, Bravo's hero ability was really cool, being able to dominate, but it wasn't exactly something that drove your game plan. It was actually the cards in the Guardian card pool that drove a lot of the strategy. And it's similar with Oldheim. Whilst those 2 different hero abilities in the defense reaction step are great, this hammer, Winter's Wail, being a one-handed elemental guardian weapon that Oldheim can use, is really indicative of a lot of the great things that Oldheim is going to be able to do. So this is a once per turn attack for 3. If an ice card is pitched to Winter's Wail gains, if this hits a hero, create a frostbite token under their control. And as we learned in the last video, frostbite tokens give your opponent essentially a 1 resource tax on the next ability or card that they play. So Winter's Wail is a 3 for 4, which is not a great return, but at the same time, in Guardian, when you're playing a lot of blue cards, the difference between costing 2 and costing 3 is not huge. Yes, it means you can't pitch a blue and use your tectonic plating and use your attack, but having 3 is having a 3-cost attack is okay, particularly where you're getting attacks on hit on your opponent. 4 is also a really important breakpoint. As we know, a lot of cards block for 3, so you're either demanding that your opponent has a defense reaction or they commit equipment to blocking, and this is just your weapon attack. So this is something that you can do over and over and over and over again. But where this card's power comes is actually in that one hand ability. And why is one hand important on this weapon? Not because you want to use 2 of them, but because we've got Rampart of the Ram's Head, this incredibly exciting offhand shield. So it's the first defensive equipment other than a common one, which we've seen as well spotted in this set. But this set is bringing us this first look at using the offhand slot of your heroes, so their second hand slot, as something defensive rather than just a way of having another weapon. So Rampart of the Ram's Head is a legendary guardian, so Bravo can use it as well, if Bravo can find a one-handed weapon to use. It defends for 0, but it says whenever you defend with Rampart of the Ram's Head, you may pay 1 resource. If you do, it gains +1 until end of turn. So this is incredibly powerful. This single-handedly makes go wide dash or go wide chain cry because they are consistently breaking the combat chain on their turns, using either Chain's ability to create soul shackles or play other non-attack actions, or Dash's ability to reload the pistol. And that means each turn they break the combat chain, you can bring your Rampart of the Ram's Head back to your offhand position and then block with it again, and even pay another resource if you want to pump its defense value even more. So if you block once with this, pay 1 resource, it becomes a 1 block. If you then spend another resource after they've broken the chain and attacked again, you can make this a 2 block. So you can potentially be looking at blocking this for like 1, 3, 6 in a turn for 3 resources across 3 different attacks. And you compare that to a really powerful piece of equipment in Carrion Husk that can block for 6 once a game, and you start to see how Rampart of the Ram's Head, particularly in those go wide or aggressive matchups, gives you just this incredible defensive capacity and capability just off 1 blue pitch each turn. So as long as they're breaking the combat chain, you get the ability to keep making your Rampart stronger and stronger. So it's one of the strongest defensive cards that we've seen in the game. Currently, Oldheim going to be pairing it with Winter's Wail as the one-handed weapon, but we might see other Guardian one-handed weapons as well that become a little bit more popular to pair with the Rampart of the Ram's Head. Glacial Footsteps is an elemental guardian attack, and a great example of what Oldheim is going to be able to do, not having Bravo's ability to just dominate off the hero card, but instead using we're starting to see a sub-theme in Ice, which is being able to give your attacks dominate by fusing. So Glacial Footsteps is a 6-cost Ice attack. So it's elemental attack, it's not an ice card itself, but it has ice fusion. So if you reveal another ice card when you play Glacial Footsteps, it is fused, and then if it's fused, it gains dominate. And it's just a 6 for 8, a regular sort of rate for a Guardian Blue, but the ability to have a 6 for 8 that has a dominate built in, when you start factoring in a lot of the other ice denial mechanics that we're going to have a look at, is just a really reasonable, common sort of rate of return. So I'm sure that we're going to be seeing at least the blues and maybe some of the others of Glacial Footsteps slotted into some Oldheim decks. Endless Winter and Frostbite, I've got a Frostbite token up here to remind us as well. So cards and activated abilities you control cost an additional 1. So when you give your opponent a Frostbite token, they're getting an additional 1 tax. And at the beginning of your end phase, or when you activate the next card or ability, destroy Frostbite. So it's a one-off tax, and other than being able to get it from our new one-handed hammer, we can also give it to our opponents with Endless Winter. So this is a 4-cost Guardian attack, a 4 for 8 at red. It's Oldheim specialization. It's also got Ice Fusion. So if you reveal an ice card when we play it, then it's fused. If it was fused, whenever the defending hero adds a defending card to this chain link, so that's either blocking or a defense reaction, create a Frostbite token under their control. If it hits a hero, so it's not crush, we don't need to be dealing 4 damage anymore, we just need to hit until the end of their next turn. Whenever they activate an ability, create a Frostbite token under their control. So this is just, I played Chain at a Road to Nationals tournament today, and just the thought of having this coming at me for only 4 resources, being fused, if I block, then I'm picking up Frostbites. If I don't block, then I'm taking 8, getting hit, and whenever I activate an ability, whether that's a Soul Shackle or anything else on my turn, you're not playing cards, but activating abilities. So activating hero abilities and activating abilities of the equipment that I have on the board, then I create a Frostbite token under my control. So even just taking a Frostbite for creating my Soul Shackle is a pretty significant, I mean, it's equivalent to a hamstring shot effectively, adding an extra tax. But if I'm doing anything more with my board, if I have any other abilities that I'm activating, then it gets incredibly hard. So that's for Chain. But for Dash, you think about how many abilities Dash is activating on her board on these big high octane turns, and Endless Winter just really puts paid to that. So any deck that is going to be using a lot of cards on the board and activating those abilities, Endless Winter is giving you a wonderful opportunity to shut that down. Even things like Snapdragon Scalers, you know, if you hit a Chain with this kind of in the mid game, when they're looking to try and go wide and activate their either Grasp of the Arknight, Snapdragon Scalers, anything like that, all of a sudden they can't without paying this additional tax. So Endless Winter, you know, like with all of these on-hit effects, they're not going to break the game in and of themselves, but having the ability to have a really good rate attack that punishes them for blocking or for not blocking, that's exactly where you want to be. Terrasunder is another really nice Guardian card. So this is one that Bravo can play as well. Again, one thing that's really interesting about the design space that we saw in Monarch as well is when they revisited things like Warrior, in Monarch with Bolton's card pool, even the generic Warrior cards tended to give things like Dustpath Pilgrimage, you know, giving the ability to use a weapon again to attack rather than go again. So in Welcome to Wraith and in Crucible of War, when we saw the kind of Dorinthia Warrior cards printed, Dorinthia craves go again, so that we were given a lot of opportunities to get go again through Glint the Quicksilver, Spoils of War, etc., hit and run. But Dorinthia has this inbuilt ability to use her weapon again, so we didn't need that quite so much, even though we've got Twinning Blade. But then Bolton kind of wants that a bit. So we got Luminar Ascension, we got Dustpath Pilgrimage, ways to give us attack with our weapon again, which Dorinthia doesn't necessarily really want in her deck because she's already got that on her hero ability. Similarly with Terrasunder, it's a really powerful card, but one of the really big draw cards to it is the Dominate. And since Bravo can already dominate, it perhaps is a little less appealing to Bravo. But what is actually just a huge boon to this card is it can give you another Crippling Crush type effect to make your opponent discard 2 cards. And as we know, you know, discarding 1 card off a pummel can be annoying. It can kind of take a little bit out of your turn, but getting crushed by a Crippling Crush, that really feels miserable. And it really is kind of like take a whole turn off. And take a whole lot of damage as well. And Terrasunder, I think, is going to find a home in Bravo, even though Bravo has this ability to naturally dominate. Dominate is not something that you mind having more of, and Oldheim is going to love this as well. So, you know, for the cost of 2 cards, one to pitch for the resources and the Terrasunder itself, your next attack this turn has +1, so a little buff, dominate, really hard to block, and if it hits, basically your opponent loses most of their next turn, if not all of it. I think this has a lot of potential, particularly with, you know, if you've got a turn where you've got this, 2 other blues, and then a 4-cost attack, and you've got a Seismic Surge carrying over from the previous turn, that's just a 4-card hand, and that's hitting incredibly hard. If you think about Endless Winter, the last Oldheim specialization, pair that with this in that 4-card hand, and you've got a 9-power dominated attack that if it hits them, they discard 2 cards, and whenever they activate an ability on their next turn, they create a Frostbite token. It's kind of like, oof. And if they block it all, then they also take that disadvantage too. So, and if they don't, then they're just copying all the damage. So I think this is the kind of card that can really present your opponent with bad options, whatever they're doing, just like Endless Winter, and especially in combination with things like Endless Winter, and that's exactly where you want to be. Channel Lake Frigid is part of what we've seen as a cycle at Majestic. So we had Channel Thunder Step as well, which was the lightning version. But Channel Lake Frigid is this aura that, unlike a lot of the early auras we saw, which hung around just for 1 turn, this hangs around for maybe 2 or 3 turns, which is just enough time, I think, for this one. I think this is a lot better than Channel Thunder Step, just from the cards we've seen so far. May turn out to be wrong once we've seen the whole card pool. But Channel Lake Frigid is a 2-cost blue, which is great. So pitches for blue, exactly what you want in your Oldheim deck. 2-cost, go again, so it doesn't take your action point for the turn. Cards and activated abilities cost opposing heroes an additional resource. So that's a pretty significant tax. Every card, every activated ability they play costs an additional resource. It also blocks for 3, which is pretty crazy for an aura. Channel Ice, at the beginning of your end phase, put a flow counter on it. So the turn you play it, you get 1 flow counter, and then each turn you get another one, an additional one. On Channel Lake Frigid, then destroy it unless you put an ice card from your pitch zone on the bottom of your deck for each flow counter on it. So the first turn you have to have pitched 1 ice card to keep it alive, basically for it to do anything. Because, I mean, they might play instants, they might do other things on your turn, particularly good against Kano, by the way. But you really want this to survive at least through 1 cycle of their turn. So you want to have at least 1 ice card in your pitch zone, but you can control that, obviously. If you pitch an ice card to play this, or if you don't have any ice cards in hand, don't play this. Pitch this instead, or put it in your arsenal. So presuming that you've pitched at least 1 ice card on the turn that you play it, it stays alive through their turn, and then the following turn, if you can pitch 2 ice cards, then you get to keep it again for another turn. And I think in a lot of games, particularly a lot of aggro matchups, if you can keep Channel Lake Frigid out through 2 cycles of their turn for kind of any of these go wide decks, or really a lot of decks full stop, it's going to be really hard for them to do anything on their turn, and maybe 2 turns. And we haven't really seen that many cards that disrupt opponents for 2 turns. In Flesh and Blood, a lot of the time you're trading your resources on 1 turn for a little bit of advantage during that turn cycle, but the capacity to get an advantage through 2 and maybe even 3 turn cycles with this card, if you're lucky and you draw a lot of ice cards to pitch on the 3rd turn, that's an incredible amount of value. And the fact that you can pitch a card, play Channel Lake Frigid, pitch another card and still pitch another blue and still come in with a decent attack, or still come in with your hammer that turn, that's a really strong turn when you're not even having to take a whole turn off to do this, like you do usually with like an Arclight Sentinel or a Towering Titan, for example, that's giving you an advantage on the following turn. This is giving you an advantage possibly for 2, maybe for 3 additional turns, and it doesn't even take up your whole hand. That seems to me like a crazy amount of value, and I imagine that Channel Lake Frigid is going to be at the core of a lot of these controlling Ice Guardian decks. Winter's Bite, we've just got a couple of other kind of themes from the Ice card pool that I want to touch on. Winter's Bite and Frostfang kind of play into this discard theme as well. So we've seen the tax you more for all of your abilities and all of your cards. We've seen the you might have to put cards from your hand on top of your library, on top of your deck from Oldheim's ability. But we've also then got Winter's Bite and Frostfang, which are an attack action Frostfang and a non-attack action Winter's Bite that basically threaten discard on your turn, threaten to just make your opponent straight up pitch cards. So Winter's Bite just says target hero discards a card unless they pay 3. Now, paying 3 is basically discarding the card anyway. I mean, obviously pitching and discarding is slightly different because if they pitch, it goes to the bottom. But they have to have a blue to be able to do that. And if they don't have a blue, then either they have to pitch 2 cards or they have to discard a card. And just for 0 resources, being able to make your opponent discard a card, that's pretty powerful. We haven't sort of seen that ability quite so much in Fab before. And I think that given what we've seen in terms of how efficient Oldheim's actions and the weapon and everything in the Oldheim deck seems to be from what's been revealed so far in terms of resources to effect cost, resource cost to effect rather, Winter's Bite just seems like another way that you're going to be able to eke out just that little bit more value than your opponent and really disrupt their game plans. Because if you Winter's Bite them and find a way to give them a Frostbite token, or make their things cost more through one of your other taxing abilities on their following turn, maybe they can't do anything at all, or at the very least, their plans are going to be severely disrupted. And you're probably going to be able to block on the swing back, and then maybe hit them with another Winter's Bite, or hit them with some more disruptive cards the following turn. So I just really see this as a way of breaking up those either combo decks, aggro decks, or just tempo decks that are trying to hold on to full hands of cards at the right time to be able to have a pivot turn and come back at you. Winter's Bite says, no, you can't do that. You can't choose the timing of when you want to have your pivot turn. And that's just absolutely huge in Fab. Frostfang is a 2 cost at blue, 3 strength attack that if it hits them, they discard a card unless they pay 2. So a very similar effect to Winter's Bite, but it's an on-hit effect. Again, it demands a block. If they don't block, then they have this effect that is a really powerful on-hit effect. So they're both taking damage and losing the card anyway. So Frostfang is sort of pretty much a must block. Now the blue, obviously they can block with just 1 card, But as soon as you get to the yellow and it's a 2 for 4, or the red and it's a 2 for 5, it becomes a lot more of a challenging proposition to block. And the fact that both Frostfang and Winter's Bite are going to be really strong ice cards that you can play multiples of because they're common and rare, so you've got all the pitch values, means that you are going to have a lot of really strong ice cards that you can reveal to your ice effects, or that you can pitch to your Oldheim to get the Oldheim ice ability, or you can reveal to your ice fusion. And this is just extremely exciting. I think these cards are going to be great. Weave Ice is another of the ice cards. So again, it's a 0 cost at blue. The next ice or elemental card attack action card you play this turn gains +1, and if it's fused, it gains Dominate. Now, we've seen that a lot of the fuses also grant Dominate, or some of them, so perhaps this is going to be a little bit redundant sometimes. But certainly a lot of your ice and a lot of your elemental guardian attacks aren't going to have Dominate. And if you can get one of your other ice fusion cards that doesn't gain Dominate, like Entwine Ice, which we've got here, and add this Dominate effect and this +1, that's pretty decent. It's a decent buff. I'm not sure. It'll depend on the exact composition of the ice decks and how many fuse cards you have that don't also get Dominate from their fuse effect as to whether Weave Ice is worth it. But it's a decent non-attack action. Certainly in Limited, I'm sure it's going to be a powerful finisher, and a lot of people are going to die to this. Entwine Ice is, as aforementioned, an ice fusion card. If it was fused, it gains Dominate. This may or may not be one that makes it into the Oldheim decks. I think, given that at blue, it's a 1 for 3 that has ice fusion and can Dominate, but it's not actually an ice card itself, means that it probably isn't going to make the cut, but obviously we'll have to wait and see for the full card pool. Flash Freeze and Snapshot are a couple that I wanted to mention. That kind of brings us to the end of the Oldheim review, if you like. And these are more Lexi cards. Flash Freeze got spoiled after I made the last video about all the Lexi cards, and it's a 1-cost Majestic. It's an elemental action. It's got Ice and or Lightning Fusion. If it was fused with an ice card, attacks you control this turn gain, when you attack with this, it gains Dominate unless defending hero pays 2. Obviously, giving your opponent choices, not ideal, but paying 2 to avoid something getting Dominate is kind of a big deal. Like, that's usually a whole nother card your opponent is having to pitch just to be able to block your attack effectively. So I'm kind of okay with that as a trade most of the time. Obviously, you're giving up a card in Flash Freeze to make that happen, but it feels like that's going to be an okay effect, particularly if you've got some powerful on-hit triggers. But where I think this card comes into its own is if you do play it in Lexi and you can use both of the fusions. So Ice and or Lightning Fusion. If you can get the Ice and Lightning Fusion happening in one turn, it also has attacks you control this turn if this hits a hero, it deal 3 damage to them. Now, that's incredibly powerful. Again, it's every attack for the rest of the turn. Flash Freeze is also that. So if you're in a Lexi deck where you're lots of different attacks, it doesn't have to be an ice attack, it doesn't have to be an elemental attack, it's just any attack you control this turn. Has this Dominate unless you pay 2, and if it hits a hero, deal 3 damage to them. It's not just a lightning zap, it's 3 damage for every attack that hits. Obviously, combining these two things, it makes it more likely every one of the rest of your attacks is going to hit, and it makes it more punishing if they do. I see Flash Freeze and the next card, which we come to later, as being very tempting as the core of a kind of one-turn kill, really strong Ranger Lexi combo. Snapshot is a 0 for 4 arrow. It's got Lightning Fusion. If it was fused, you may activate abilities of bows you control an additional time this turn as though they're an instant. Now, as long as you have one snapshot in your hand, one lightning card in your hand that you can reveal to this snapshot, any other snapshots you have also turn into go again and draw a card, as long as you've got resources to keep paying, if you combine it with Death Dealer. Because what happens is Death Dealer, which is a bow, a Ranger 2-handed bow, has an ability that says it's an action. You can pay 1 resource, put an arrow card from your hand into an empty arsenal slot face up. If you do, draw a card. Snapshot lets you pay that go again as well on the Death Dealer, importantly. Snapshot lets you play that Death Dealer action as though it were an instant additional time. Now what that means is that it actually nets you an action point. Because the Death Dealer ability says go again at the end, it means you get your action point back. So if you've played it as an instant, you're actually up an action point, which means you can then use that action point to play another snapshot. The second snapshot you play, as long as you've still got that lightning card to fuse, lets you activate Death Dealer again, putting another arrow into your arsenal, potentially another snapshot, drawing a card and getting another action point back. So Snapshot Death Dealer seems to me to be quite an obscene combo if you can pull it off. You do need resources to keep using the Death Dealer. You do need a lightning card in hand to pay the lightning fusion on each of the snapshots as you play them. But you are drawing extra cards each time you activate the Death Dealer, and you're getting to put your snapshot into your arsenal. And if you combine that with a flash freeze at the start of the turn, if you can assemble that combo and have flash freeze, snapshot, you've got your Death Dealer in play, a lightning card in hand, and perhaps you've stacked your deck, so you've got a few snapshots in a row, interspersed with a resource card or two. This could be an absolutely monster turn, given that each of your snapshots is going to have, if it hits, it deals an additional 3 damage. So just wanted to call that out as something pretty exciting on the Lexi side of things as well. So I hope you've enjoyed today's video. Talked a little bit about Oldheim, talked a bit about some exciting new Lexi shenanigans that we've seen come out here as well. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe to support the channel, and we'll hopefully be back with our Earth and Lightning hero, which we don't know the class of yet as of the filming of this video, but hopefully we'll find out very soon. Can't wait to come back to you with that. And wherever you are, have a great evening, have a great day, have a great morning, whatever time it is for you, and hope you keep enjoying the Tales of Aria spoilers of Flesh and Blood. Take care.